So the Switch is getting quite a few indie games, fighting games, arcade games in general. We think Virtual Console is coming soon, and that'll probably bring even more fighting games and really 2D platformers to the Switch. So it almost makes sense that there should be a fight stick, or at least a couple fight sticks out there for us to buy. We saw the one from Ori a while ago and never saw anything from there. Well, I took it upon myself, and I thought it would make sense if we built one. So I did. And what's great is you can too, because realistically, this wasn't that hard to do, and I'm actually going to show you how to build one of these right here in this video. First thing though, I have to thank BangGood. I know, I laugh too. BangGood provided all of the buttons and the joysticks and everything for me after I kind of had an idea for this project, and they were kind enough to send them out to me so I can complete this project in a timely manner. So thank you to them. I'll link down in the description for some of their DIY parts, which include things like the joystick, buttons, even a USB board. If you just want to make one for your PC where you don't do any soldering, they have those. So I'll leave that in the description down below for you. There's also places on Amazon and stuff like that you can go to that I will leave in the description below, so you can kind of go shopping for any colored buttons or joysticks that you want to get. Now, before I get started, I'm told by several people off camera that I need to say, if you're not comfortable with power tools, maybe you're younger or soldering, find someone who is, or seek supervision. I'm not responsible for you damaging your controller or burning your house down. Is that good enough? I'm getting a lot of eye rolls. Now, with all that out of the way, let's build an arcade stick out of Tupperware for your Nintendo Switch.
First thing we need is a controller we can build off of. In this case, I chose the SNES 30 from 8-Bit Do. This controller is wireless and has a battery that lasts a little over 10 hours. This seemed like the perfect fit as it has all of the necessary buttons for an arcade stick dedicated to fighting and platforming games. It also helps this controller is readily available right on Amazon. I'll leave a link to this controller in the description below for you guys. You'll also need several arcade stick parts, including a joystick of some kind. There are different types of arcade sticks that range in number of directions and size. For the most part, I would stick to an arcade stick that has an 8-gate or circular gate, but the decision is ultimately up to you. It's a good idea to look up the different types of arcade stick variants to see which one is for you. You will also need buttons. I was sent several different buttons, but they all function pretty much the same way by using 2 points on that button to interrupt or complete a circuit. Finally, you will need cables of some kind. These cables were also provided along with the buttons, and I like the idea of the quick release tabs to change button configurations. You of course can just solder the wires to the buttons, but that makes for a long process to change button placement around. Finally, you need to choose your arcade stick enclosure. Keep in mind, I use Tupperware, but you can use whatever you want to build the box out of. You could use things such as wood or acrylic. Some people even use old shoe boxes. As long as the structure is strong enough and can be cut out or drilled into, you can use it. Now let's get to actually making the arcade stick. Take your SNES 30 apart down to the motherboard by removing the Phillips head screws holding the case together. When faced with the motherboard, you'll notice several black pads around the board. These are the different buttons and the locations to wire our buttons to. You want to get a sharp edge and start scratching away at the coating on top of the pads. We are looking for the copper shine underneath of the coating so we can stick our solder to that. Spend time and just scratch off all of the buttons in one setting to make the next part easier. Using some flux and a soldering iron, start trying to stick solder to the different pads. I found after some testing that the bottom 2 pads are the ones we want for the buttons to function correctly. If you're having a hard time getting solder to stick, try cleaning the pads with some rubbing alcohol to free up any debris that may have been left behind. You'll see here I soldered the right wire to the incorrect spot, but this was during testing to figure out which pads were needed. This is what you want your solder to look like though after it sticks and the wire is held on correctly. You can see here after I soldered everything together that the bottom 2 pads were used for each button. The directional pad was a little different as the center point and the left point were used to complete each direction push. The right and left shoulder buttons are really easy to figure out as you can see where the traces are to complete the circuit, plain as day. You're going to end up with wires everywhere, so be careful when moving this around since now we can actually try it out. I set the Switch up in tabletop mode and followed the directions for the SNES 30 to connect the controller to the Switch. After connected, I tested the joystick and buttons. Make sure all of your connections are solid as I had a loose wire and the arcade stick was acting up really badly, jumping all over the place. Once you're satisfied with the testing phase, we can start building the arcade stick. We started by placing the buttons in a pattern that we would want on the final arcade stick. There are several different layouts that some people like, so make sure you take the time to see what is comfortable for you. In this case, we went with 3 buttons on top and 3 buttons below those for 6 buttons total. We placed the start and select buttons on the side to stay out of the way from any stray presses during gameplay. Next, we measured between each button and drew out the center point for drilling. I used a circular cutting bit to make perfect circles for each button. The first hole did not come out the best, and I quickly figured out that you want to go slow with Tupperware when drilling, or you could crack it. Next part is pretty straightforward. We need to add our buttons. The buttons I opted for on the final arcade stick design were buttons that screwed in from the back. Pretty easy overall, and we can see the arcade stick finally starting to come together. To mount the joystick, I drilled 4 holes and used a bolt in each corner along with a nut on the other side to hold it together. I just hand tightened it since the plastic is brittle and could crack. I didn't want to accidentally over tighten it and damage the mounting hole. Now comes the fun part, wiring everything up. I ended up having to extend some wires to reach different buttons when the container was opened, and it took a while to do. This was the most tedious part for me, as extending each wire using an extra cut wire and solder took a while. However, when I finished wiring, closed it up, and took it for a spin, I found the entire process was completely worth it.
Oh my god, this is so responsive. It's so good. Up and down ladders. Oh, it's so good.
Dude, this is pretty legit. Alright, I think we're start. Oh, that's awesome. Yep, start. Oh my god. And home button was selecting something else. Selecting down. There we go. Oh, this is awesome. And that's all there is to it. It's pretty straightforward. Yes, it's tedious, but if you set a weekend to the side, you could definitely build one of these on your own at home. Order the parts, put it together in something like Tupperware, or maybe you're a little more handy than I am with things like wood, and you can sand down, paint, and make an actual legit arcade stick. Maybe even get a slab of acrylic with some artwork underneath and screw it into the top. Really, your imagination is the only limitation here for building an enclosure, because actually designing it with the wiring and buttons, while a lot of people see it as difficult, not that bad, really. I think I've outlined it pretty well here for you guys. So get the imaginations going, make a cool arcade stick for your Switch, or what's great, because this is an SNES 30, any device that will work with, including your phone, your computer, anything. you can do it. Also, I went ahead, I didn't mention this in the video, I hot glued everything down, and then I cut a small hole on this side so that I could charge the device and leave it inside here at all times. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed seeing an arcade stick being built out of plastic Tupperware. Thanks guys, I will see you in the next video.